Medieval polyphony. Medieval vocal polyphonic works generally display a typical plan. It is significant to note that this plan is the same for both sacred and secular works, and in fact we shall see that this tells us something about the origins of the intense cultivation of polyphony in Western music. It's really easy to apprehend the plan of such compositions as long as you remember that there are 3 points of comparisons between 2 types of voices or melodies in such works. Let us consider the name and the literal meaning, as well as the origin and the character of each of these 2 types of voices. We will begin by taking a look at these details for the lowest voice, or the foundation of the work. The lowest voice is called the cantus firmus. Cantus firmus is a Latin phrase, but if you take a look at these 2 words, you see familiar words within them. For example, in the word firmus you see the word firm, which means fixed, and in cantus you can see the English word cant, which looks a little bit like the word chant, another name for a song. So taken together, cantus firmus means fixed song. The cantus firmus, the lowest voice in a typical medieval polyphonic vocal work, always was an existing liturgical melody or chant, whether this work was sacred or secular. The cantus firmus of such a composition has a very distinct character because the cantus firmus is presented in long, slow notes. In fact, these are extremely long, slow notes. Now let us consider these details for the upper voices of such a composition. The upper voices of a typical medieval vocal polyphonic work are called counterpoints. You certainly have heard the word counterpoint before, but you probably did not know that this is a specifically musical term. It's very easy to define simply by looking at the word itself. The beginning of it, counter, simply means against, and point refers to the note shapes of medieval notations. Basically, notes were called points because they looked very much like dots. So therefore, this type of a melody is called a counterpoint because it was written against the points or the notes of the cantus firmus. The counterpoints of these compositions were newly composed melodies or a melody in the case of a 2-voice composition. The character of the counterpoint stands in strong contrast to the cantus firmus because the counterpoints were written in shorter, faster notes than the cantus firmus. In fact, sometimes there are dozens of notes in the counterpoints for each note of the cantus firmus. Let us consider the significance of the situation that we see in this composition. We have a composition that has as its foundation a liturgical melody already existing. We see that the notes of this existing melody have been protracted to extreme lengths. And we see that new melodies are written to be sung against it, and these melodies are written in short, fast notes. The very name of the lowest voice, the cantus firmus, tells us about this composition. Cantus firmus, as we recall, refers to a fixed song, and in fact, in medieval Catholic Church services, musicians could not write new songs for the chants of the Mass. They had to sing the very words and the very music that were composed for that particular song. Both the text and the melodies were fixed, thus they were called fixed songs. Medieval church singers, of course, had the same artistic aspirations as singers today have. that is, to show off what they can do with a certain composition or what they can do in terms of their own decoration of an existing melody. And the plan that we see here, taking an existing melody, drawing its notes out to be extremely long, and writing shorter, faster noted melodies to be sung against them, basically explains the cultivation of polyphony in the West. In fact, these typical medieval polyphonic vocal works were essentially decorated versions of the fixed songs that were used in the church services of the Middle Ages. We shall consider two types of works that use the plan that has been described earlier. In order to do so, we shall first consider the name of the genre, and then we shall consider its cultural context. Let's take a look at a typical sacred medieval polyphonic work of this type. A sacred work that uses the plan that we described earlier is called an organum. Organum. Notice that the word has the accent on the first syllable, and its proper plural is organa, with an A at the end of it. Organa were composed to be used in church services, and you can use the very name of this genre, organa, to recall the word organ, and when you think of the word organ, you normally think of its typical context as being that of a church. Organum, sacred composition. Now let us turn our attention to a typical secular medieval polyphonic work of this type. A secular work of this type is the isorhythmic motet. Now there's an awful lot in this generic designation, but let's take a look at it one word at a time. Isorhythmic. If you take a look at the word, you see the word rhythm within it, and in fact this late 19th century term refers to the repeated rhythmic patterns in these compositions. Sometimes one voice, such as the cantus firmus, might have a short repeated rhythmic pattern in it, and the same might happen in the other voices as well. The word motet comes from the French word mot, M-O-T, but pronounced mot, and mot means word. Now it might seem a bit strange that the word word should be used in the name of a genre that refers to a song, which is basically words set to music. But here it makes perfect sense because the isorhythmic motet is a polytextual composition. You know that the word poly means many or more than one. Text refers to text, so this is a sort of composition that has more than one text sung at any one time. Now you know very well if you were to have three singers standing in front of you singing a composition and all three of them were singing three different texts, you would understand absolutely nothing of the work. And in fact, that is exactly what happens with an isorhythmic motet if you are simply the auditor or the listener of this type of a composition. Indeed, isorhythmic motets were written for the entertainment of the performers. It makes perfect sense that a person singing one text could understand another text sung by another person in the immediate vicinity. The same sort of thing happens when people have conversations, especially heated ones, or even arguments. Both parties are able to understand what the other person is saying as well as what they are saying at the same time.